I've changed the title a bit to make it a non-clinical scientist, because forensics is a very strange area. It's sort of not in medicine. Well, it's in medicine, but then there's law, there's science, and there's the community. So it is a little different. I'm not going to discuss everyday work. Our everyday work basically are autopsies for the state coroner. So we autopsy cases of sudden unexpected natural deaths, suicides, homicides, vehicle accidents, generate reports, go to court, and deal with matters that way. But I want to focus on a range of other activities. It's a bit stream of consciousness, I must admit. But the thing about forensics is you can choose to make every day different, and it is quite... Everybody who comes up here will say what they does is the best thing in the world, but this really is fun. Now, I did medicine in the middle of the last century at the University of Tasmania, electives in Papua New Guinea, did flying doctor work in Arnhem Land. My postgraduate training, I qualified in general practice with a bit of anthropology in Canada, emergency internal medicine, pathology, then paediatric pathology at the Children's here, forensic pathology, and now I'm the professor of pathology. Now, what has changed? That's 1976, the hair's gone, and the desire to climb limestone cliffs has also gone. So that's me climbing cliffs outside Mendy in the Southern Highlands. I know, I showed my colleagues and they pick other people instead of me. Going to clinics, we used to walk across bridges like that. We'd go past ancestor shrines with sweet potato gardens. It was an extraordinary time to work there. I was interested in third world medicine. In that I include Arnhem Land. I worked as a flying doctor there based at Nhulunbuy. We used to go to Yirrkala, Gulawinku, Ramangining. One of my jobs, because we flew around in these nomads, was to lean out of or look out the window, make sure the wheels had come down before we landed. And I kid you not, we had to do that. They were shocking. The alternative was, of course, driving to some of these places, and the roads were not the best. It was a special time. I got to know a lot of Aboriginal people. The pelican is my totemic animal, and my Aboriginal name is Galamay. And I really am pleased that I had that relationship. Emergency medicine. I was going to do emergency medicine, but I was in Belize snorkeling for too long, and by the time I got back to Canada, there were no positions available. So I ended up in pathology. Fortunately, when I look at how difficult emergency medicine is nowadays. At the university, I lecture not only students, but I do a lot of international workshops. I've done workshops in about 30 countries. That's in Kazakhstan, and it went as well as it looks. We had 4 hours of headbutting. They really didn't like what I had to say. So my career's been on this steady downhill path for decades, really. The hierarchy of medicine, just to give you a sort of a roadmap, if you're wondering, if you're a medical student, if you're crazy with quite a significant attention span, psychiatry is perfect. If you're sane, not really hard-working, you're afraid of the light, radiology. If you're very hard-working but have a horrible attitude, surgery, clearly. If your attitude doesn't matter because your patient's asleep, anaesthesia, if your patient's dead, pathology. And we get bad rap, actually. You know, people say, well, you know, you're sometimes right, but you're always too late. Now, there is routine casework, but there's a lot more. You never know what's going to come through the door with forensics, and that's the exciting part about it. My first week on call at forensics, I got a call from the head of major crime. I'm in a little place called Snowtown in a bank vault. There's some barrels. Do you want to come up and have a look? And I said, oh, no. He said, what do? I said, I'll take the lid off. And I literally said, if there's a foot, give me a call back, which he did because he'd found 2. So there were 9 dismembered bodies in those barrels. I'll get you to guess the university that the technician went to who labelled those. A, C, B, E, F, D. I'm not going to tell. Disaster victim identification work, that can occur at any time, and I was involved with the body identifications in Bali in October 2002. That was the Thari Club. The bomb went off there, took out the building opposite on Legian Street, and Paddy's Bar was up here. 202 dead, 200 homicides, 2 suicides. And it's very difficult, I mean, with explosions. That is mainly non-human material, but I'm going through it looking for human remains and bits of explosive device, so, you know, to tell us what sort of device was used. How far do you go with the DNA? I mean, this is the problem with commingling. If I detonated a device here, the front row would turn into me. I won't say it's an improvement, but it makes identification difficult because everything's blended. But if you do get a hit, then the family know that their loved one was there, so that's why it's important. The tsunami I went to in December 2004, that was very hard because it was just a mess. I mean, it's shattered timber, nails, corrugated iron, sewage, rotting dogs, rotting humans. It's in the tropics, so it really is a tough environment. And I was on Phuket Island. We were based at Khao Lak, but I was on Phuket Island, and I was emptying containers that hadn't been refrigerated for a month. So that was difficult work. As a forensic pathologist, you can become an expert for courts locally, nationally and internationally. I've been a registered expert with the International Criminal Court in The Hague since 2009, and I was involved in a War Crimes Commission looking at the killings in Srebrenica in 1995. That was under the auspices of the government of Srpska, not the ICC. And the potted history really is, essentially you've got 12,000 Bosnian troops surrounded by the Serbians there. They broke out and went through Serbian lines, tanks, mortars, over landmines, and 8,000 got through to Tuzla. So you've got 4,000 dead soldiers. There are graves along the side of the breakout. There are 4,000 bodies there. The common belief is that these are massacred civilians. So when I was asked to look at this, I just said, well, okay, let's do the maths. If we've got 4,000 massacred civilians, where are the soldiers? And the truth is difficult to come to. One of the members of the commission, we did a 1,000-page report, had been the head of the CIA in the Balkans during that time, so he had some very interesting stories. But it's really, is it genocide or is it massacre war crime? Nobody says that it wasn't a hideous war crime. But it really, we don't think, fulfills the legal definition of genocide, and that's what people are being tried for. So we came up with our opinion just to start debate and got tremendously bad. We were attacked as genocide deniers. It was quite nasty. That's my dog, Lucy, is my best pupil. I'm telling her every true genius is bound to be naive, and she's saying, yeah, what a moron. I mean, you should have seen that one coming. What about research? We did research, and I'll just pick a few areas just to show you how diverse it can be. Amphetamines. It was thought that amphetamines can actually worsen head injury. So if you're high on amphetamines, you get hit, it'll be worse for you. Actually, with an animal model, we showed that amphetamines are neuroprotective. So in other words, if somebody goes down, they may have required more force. Therefore, that may up the charge from manslaughter to murder. So something you're doing in a laboratory can have quite significant effects in court. Shaken baby syndrome, people saying they shook the baby because they were angry. We hypothesised that you can get serious brain damage with shaking alone without impact. Other people said, no, they shake the baby, then they hit the baby or they throw the baby. We showed with an anaesthetised animal model that shaking it alone can cause death. So you don't need additional trauma. So a perpetrator's story that they shook the baby in rage, but then took the baby to get medical care, may be quite plausible. Alcohol and head trauma. For years, forensic pathologists have said blunt head trauma is worse if you're drunk. If you've got a blood alcohol of 0.3 and you get walloped, you can go down much more quickly and have actually lethal effects with minimal neuropathology. But that was just our sort of mythology. However, we did an animal study and we showed the brain magnesium topples when you're exposed to alcohol, and that's required to recover from blunt head trauma. So what it means is that less force may cause greater injury. So again, you may be putting this from murder to manslaughter. So it can be argued many ways. Babies sleeping face down, increased risk of SIDS. Professor Hannah Kenny in Harvard has looked at serotonin. We thought, what about substance P? It's another neurotransmitter. And so we sent our students to Harvard and we looked at substance P, and we found that some SIDS babies have markedly reduced levels of substance P in the back of the brain in areas that control head and neck movement. So for decades we've been saying, well, why don't they just lift their heads up when they're in soft bedding? They don't because they can't. I think that's one of the most significant developments in SIDS in the last 10, 15 years. Fiona Bright was the woman who did the work. What we're now looking for is a genetic marker to see if we can find a gene defect that causes this, so therefore we can maybe screen babies and work out those who are at particular risk. Preventive pathology, it's something I've done for years, looking at accidents when they come into the mortuary. What's happened? Can we prevent them? And particularly I've been looking at unsafe sleeping environments for babies, and I've worked with Consumer Affairs and Kids Safe and the coroners. We're part of a push to change legislation so that it's illegal to sell dangerous cots now. So we don't see as many of these deaths. Historical forensics. is something you could wade into. Now, I got involved with a documentary about bushrangers. There are two things I'd say about bushrangers. Actually, there are three things. Maths is not a strong point in forensics. Robin Hood did not steal from the poor and keep it for himself. And I think, being a simple person, that murdering serving police officers is not a good thing. And if you put Ned Kelly through any psychiatric evaluation, he is a classic sociopath. The drilled letter, his own words, he wants to take the fat of people who oppose him, boil it and pour it down their throats. He wants to tie people out onto ant heaps. He wants the blood and the brains of the police to rain down. This is not a normal person. I would have hugged him twice. Such is life. He didn't say that. So if you have a Ned Kelly tattoo with such is life, I'd actually revisit that. Ben Hall was a bushranger in the colony, New South Wales, around the same time. And we felt maybe the historical documentation of events from the colonies is not accurate. And there were two conflicting viewpoints about Ben's death. One was that the police just came up upon him when he was asleep and murdered him. The other is the police version, which is a little different. They said they were waiting for him in the morning. They called on him to halt. He ran, shot at them. Constable Hipkiss shot him with a .56 and down he went. So we wanted to look at this with the hypothesis that maybe the police were telling the truth and that Ben wasn't murdered. And that's his gun belt. And I was very lucky to be able to look at it in the Powerhouse Museum in Sydney. That doesn't look like a bullet hole to me. But nobody had actually put it together. And so I put it together, and what have we got? We've got an oval defect, bullet hole, that's shelved. The only place that you could do that when he was wearing the belt was behind and to the left where Hipkiss was standing. We did scanning EM around here. We found lead from the bullet, and we found explosive material from 19th century fire weapons, bullets. So it is a 19th century bullet hole. It perfectly corroborates the police story. I put Captain Moonlight up because he's got a professor of pathology's eyes, really. He was involved in a shootout between his gang and the police at Wandabadgery Station in 1879. I'm putting him up just to show you some of the equipment we use nowadays at crime scenes. This is Wandabadgery. It's 40 degrees. That is all dried sheep manure. It is horrible. That's our tent, and this is a LiDAR. I don't know whether you've ever seen a LiDAR being used. It's a box that fires out 10,000 laser points, brings them back in, and then coordinates it, and you can reproduce the scene. So this is at Monash in Melbourne, 22 degrees, lattes, lovely. But you can see it's very similar. What you can do, though, is you can actually take off the trees, you can move through it. The crime scene recently I didn't go to, and the police officer showed me the LiDAR footage. So he took me in through the front door, went down the corridor, we went into the lounge room. He lightened it so I could see the body, and then he took me up through the roof, like a drone. I mean, I find them extraordinary. That's Adam, the archaeologist, showing Steve where he'd excavated, where the buildings were involved in the shootout. And what we've got, we could repopulate it with this equipment. So you've got three bushrangers in the kitchen. They could not see Webb Bowen, who was the policeman shot. Rogan was hiding under the bed. He didn't fire a shot. He was a bushranger. Moonlight and Gus Warnicki were the ones that were in line. And it was Gus Warnicki, the youngest, the 15-year-old, who died of his wounds, who actually killed Webb Bowen. Interestingly enough, Moonlight and Rogan were hung within 4 months. Rogan hadn't fired a shot. But colonial justice was a bit different then. Isolated Indigenous communities. I visited a lot of these when I was doing flying doctor work, far from health centres, really problematic health issues that need to be addressed. But where would a pathologist fit into that? Well, in the APY lands, when somebody dies, the elders will move everybody to a sorry camp where they'll work out what happened, and they're away from facilities. So they're not very good places to be. So when I was at a petrol sniffing inquest in Umawar, they said, well, the elders would like to talk to you. And they said, because you're taking the bodies south for autopsies, we're waiting for the autopsy reports, which means they could be in these camps for months. I mean, I was horrified with this. And so we talked for a long time, and then we thought, well, maybe I could issue a provisional report on the day of the autopsy, just a one-pager, probable cause of death, and then I could put in it, no sticks, stones, bones, or other foreign objects were found in the body to implicate another person in the death. So what I'm saying is, presuming this is the case, I found no physical evidence of sorcery. I'm not saying there wasn't sorcery, just there was no physical evidence. So what does that matter? Well, it means the information can go to the camps, they can make early decisions about cause of death and they can disband the camps. And that's been a tremendously useful thing to happen. So it shows you that a 1% shift in forensic practice can make incredible differences to communities. I've been involved in veterinary forensic pathology. Those are those beautiful dolphins down at the Port River that people were killing for some reason. I seriously prefer dolphins to humans. That is a dolphin calf, a very young one. It's got a wound in the side. I was called in to have a look at it, so I treated it like a homicide. I measured it, I photographed it, I worked out the direction, and then did the dissection. And that's blubber, and you can see there's hemorrhage around the wound. So this animal had blood pressure when it was stabbed, and that's because it was stabbed in the aorta. Those are all holes in the aorta. So somebody just decided to kill this beautiful animal. It's a very serious criminal act in South Australia. $300,000 fine, plus or minus 2 years in prison. Is anybody being charged or convicted? No. However, we formed a dolphin trauma group with the Water Police and Forensic Science and let people know that we were actually investigating this properly, and so the deaths have stopped, fortunately. What do? We determine cause of death. Yes, that was a lethal wound. We analysed the wounds and we provided a chain of evidence. So if blood was taken, we knew exactly what time and how it was clocked into forensic science. Finally, I'll talk about human rights issues. This is something that I'm very passionate about. I'm working with Navpreet Kaur. She's a human rights lawyer in Chandigarh, and we've looked at acid attacks, child labour, dowry deaths, honour killings, menstrual health issues, sexual assaults, manual scavenging. That is the manual cleaning of sewers. The Dalits, the lowest caste in India, are the ones who swim in the sewers to actually manually unblock this. It's illegal, but it's still widespread. Acid attacks are particularly horrible. These are physical assaults where acid or corrosive is thrown over another person. The aim is usually not to kill the person. What you want to do is you want to maim and disfigure them so that they've got severe, permanent, disfiguring, incapacitating and painful injuries for decades. In Asia, the victims are generally young women who have refused inappropriate marriage proposals or sexual advances, often from much older males. Navpreet says it's because of the patriarchal society and or male ego. I think it goes together. It can be part of property or dowry disputes, or even just part of more generalised domestic violence. Navpreet launched a book last year. She's working with Lakshmi, who is an acid survivor. There's a Lakshmi Foundation. Lakshmi won the International Woman of the Year in 2018. So an incredible person, both of them. On the 25th of November 2022, there is the United Nations 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. Keep an eye on that. We're hoping to get a film into that. But so what I wanted to show you with all of this is there's more to forensic pathology than just dissection. And if you're interested in any of the areas, just look at me on Google Scholar and you'll find there are a whole lot of other things that I've been up to. To be a good forensic pathologist, I think you have to have curiosity and compassion. You have to ask questions, but then you have to know what to do with the answers, because they can be confronting and they may be answers that you didn't expect, but they have to be handled sensitively. So to get there, the yellow is compulsory, 6 years of medicine, internship for a year, pathology training 5 years. I did clinical practice for 5 years, I did postgraduate training for a year. Research is important. If you don't do research, I don't think you're thinking. So I think that's a must. That is Neetu. She was here in Adelaide 2 months ago. She's obviously an acid attack survivor. She was promoting the film, which hopefully is going to show at the university. One of the amazing things about forensics is you get to meet and work with extraordinary people. I mean, resilience is a term that's just thrown around. This is the most resilient person I think I've come across. And the incredible thing with her is that after a while you just don't see the scars. So, thank you.